Hello, chat. How are we feeling today? Oh, 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 oh. No, no, stop, please. Chatterino going crazy. Full mural. Hell yeah, Jordan. Igloo, Logan, Courtney, Mom Tomology, welcome back. Tired Eye, Tired Cat, excuse me, Dan, Roxers, Thunder Monty, Brit, Emerald Pigeon, Ams, Cloudy, LPB 84, Molly, Shrimp, Nightwing, Inkpot, Tortilla, Aloka, hello. First of all, welcome back. Welcome to another exciting Alveus Chat Chats. But, before we get started, you should all be incredibly proud of yourselves. This community, quite phenomenal. For those of you who may have missed it, we filled in the mural. The Alveus Research and Recovery Institute, the initial $1 million has been fully funded in just over 72 hours. And that's pretty unbelievable. Even Maya herself said it. She was expecting this to be a months-long process, and we took care of it in like 3 days. So, as we've always said, this is definitely the best community on Twitch. Not only for your generosity and support and care for nature and these animals, but also for coming here to hang out every Wednesday night and talk about bugs. So, multifaceted, but definitely acknowledge that you guys were part of something phenomenal the past few days. Hedgewich Wren, thank you for the raid. Welcome into Alveus Bug Hunts. Week max, but not 3 days. Yes. Well, we'll work around the wolf mural tonight. Logan's got his work cut out for him, getting us the right framing going on here, but start off with our pasture friend, wolf spider. Those big glowing eyes are the result of a special membrane in the back of their eye called the tapetum lucidum, and it's the same membrane in the back of the eye that gives big cats and deer and those other things that have the reflective eyes in the IR. So that just helps them bring in more light at night. It bounces it around more inside the eye, so they're able to process things a little bit better in the dark. So you typically see that in nocturnal things that are actively hunting. So wolf spiders are active predators. They are singly, chasing down whatever their food item is going to be. But the orb weaving spiders, for instance, the big ones that we see in the webs hanging in the rafters here sometimes, those are not going to have that same tapetum lucidum layer because they're not actively going after their prey items. Their webs are up, and basically whatever flies into it. But they don't need to chase anything down, so they don't necessarily need to have really excellent night vision. They just need to have that very, very strong web that is up and ready to catch insects as they fly in. Ooh, thanks, Space. Thank you. Another thing with the spider webs, though, is that they're constructed very intentionally. You know, people often ask, I don't think anyone in the chat has specifically asked it tonight, but how do the spiders walk around on the web without getting stuck in it themselves? Well, they have different sections that they construct. They first make the outside part of the web out of non-sticky material, and then they make the internal structures. And based on how much and what specific type of silk they're putting out, they can control where they'll lay some parts that are sticky and some parts that are not. And so because the spider has constructed the web, thank you, Starberry. Thank you for asking the question everybody wants to know. Since the spider constructed the web in a way that's helpful for it, it knows where it can and can't walk around on the web, and those sticky pieces are close enough together to grab onto other things. The spiders don't need a ton of room to walk around. They can step. They have very small toes, so they have need very small places for them to actually be able to walk around the web. But in general, what happens is that something larger would fly into the web and get stuck on like a few of the sticky pieces. And then it goes, oh no, I'm stuck, and starts flapping around and trying to figure out how to get out of the web. And as it does that, it entangles itself more. As it's flapping its wings, those wings will go up and hit other pieces of sticky bits of web. And so typically the more they struggle, the more they actually get wrapped up in the webbing itself. But not all spiders have webs that function like that either, though. Like widow webs, like black widow webs, they're very tangled and very low to the ground. And so what widows do is they will make their web tangles, and they'll have anchor points all around it, but then in the center, they will have pieces of silk that are attached to the ground. And then those edge pieces, or those ones that are in the center, are sticky. And when the insect will walk over to it, those pieces will break, and the tension that the spider put on the web as it was attaching it will then essentially take that insect up into the rest of the web like an alien abducting a cow. So they touch it on the ground, they get tangled up in it, and then they break that line that they're initially attached to, and it gets tossed up into more of the web where the spider has quicker access to it, and other web strands up there that help it tangle them up. Widows have that very messy web architecture that's called a tangle web, essentially, or some people would call it a cobweb. So spiders use a lot of different silk for a lot of different ways, and they can even construct their webs in different ways, kind of depending on their needs. When they lay eggs, are the eggs in a different web than the ones they're hunting with? Do you mean it? Well, I'll answer, I guess, both ways that I could interpret this question. They do have different silk that they use to make egg sacs that is different than the silk that they use to make webs. As for physical location of the egg sac, it depends on the spider. There are some that will keep it and hang it front and center. Golden silk orb weavers, which are a fairly common thing down here in Florida, have really big, very robust egg sacs that they will just leave in the main part of the web. And I don't know if they use it for bait, but they can kind of probably draw in some larger prey items to then have resources to be able to give to the babies when they hatch. But others will take it and kind of hang it off to the side, way away from everything. But then wolf spiders, for instance, who don't have a web necessarily that they can keep the eggs in, they carry their egg sac around with them. So the answer, like to most things in entomology, like we've definitely talked about before, is that it depends. There's not a one clear cut answer, but yeah, spiders will sometimes leave it right in the middle of their hunting web, but others will move it off to the side, and others just will simply not have webs at all to be able to do anything with. So, a couple of different options. Are there any spiders that don't eat other insects? Yes, Igloo. So if you hop into the bug cord that we talked about that like 2 weeks ago, there is a jumping spider called Bagheera kiplingi that feeds on domatia, which are these little, or sorry, they're called Belchian bodies, that feed on these little structures that plants make for ants to carry away and kind of get protected by. And that is the only mostly vegetarian spider that we know of. Spiders as a whole are the largest group of strictly predatory organisms on the planet. Ground beetles, like the ones that I work on, there's 44,000 species worldwide, but there's a good portion of them that will feed preferentially on seeds and will feed on plant material. But spiders are the largest predatory group, and until we figured out that Bagheera kiplingi would feed on these Belchian bodies, spiders were thought to be exclusively predatory. But that species does seem to preferentially feed on plant material. All right, let me catch up here. What do we got? What do we got? Local spiders make bigger webs with further apart anchor points, or I'm just noticing more. That's possible. Lorba Borb. I'm not sure where you're located, but as it's getting cooler, there are fewer insects flying. So it would make sense to me that they would literally need to cast a wider net to be able to catch as much food as they need. So it wouldn't surprise me if there were web size differences as seasonalities change throughout the year. It's starting to cool down in certain parts of North America, so if you're in North America, that would actually make a lot of sense to me. When do my spiders rest? It depends on the spider. The big orb weavers will oftentimes only set up their webs at night because during the day they're very attractive to larger predators like birds and things like that. So most wolf spiders will tend to be resting during the day and come out at night to hunt with their special reflective eyes. But orb weavers will also tend to be out at night, but, you know, obviously a lot higher up. Jumping spiders, on the other hand, though, are most active during the day. So it depends on the type of spider. If you're talking about the same spider seeing him when he is awake, all times of the year or all times of the day, I'm not really sure what's going on there. But yeah, again, it depends on the spider. Do huntsmen also carry their egg sacs because they don't have webs? Convicted quokka. That's a different quokka than normal. Typically, huntsmen will attach them to the underside of tree bark. So they'll go into like a little crevice in a tree and lay an egg sac there and then just leave it. There was one time that I had a huntsman spider that I was keeping to take in for a class demonstration, and I had it in a a plastic jar with a piece of bark in it and everything like that, with air holes in the top, obviously. And I kept it for a while, and I was waiting to get to this lecture when I would need to take it in. And one day I come into my house, and all over my ceiling there are like hundreds of little tiny spiders. And I'm like, where did you all come from? And apparently that huntsman that I had found and was keeping was gravid when I collected her, meaning she had eggs. And just between the two little pieces of bark that I had in her enclosure, she laid that egg sac, so I never saw it even when I was feeding her and all of that stuff. And then the spiders were small enough to get out of the air holes. So my roommate and I, we had to very carefully extract like over 100 spiderlings from our ceiling. I would definitely try to move them outside if you can, Quokka. Just because there's more for them to feed on outside and they're more natural habitats. Oh god. Nicole, you may, but there's no guarantee that I'll be able to answer it. Hunches baby spiders on diorama. Would not be a fan of coming home to that. Yeah, as much as I love spiders and like I intentionally had that spider in my house, I was also not thrilled. Same sort of thing when praying mantis eggs accidentally hatch in people's houses. It's not like they're anti praying mantis by any means, but just having them in the house is a whole different story than having them like contained in the house. For ecology classes. All right, Courtney's. If I don't get it, you're on deck. Links and snowshare hair population graph. Yeah, that thing is messed up. But yes, I am quite familiar with it. Love handling spiders with the late 92nd room when I still cry. Comp Magic. This is Chat Chats. We're looking for insects on the cameras. If you have any insect questions, I'm happy to answer them while we're waiting for Nicole to get out her ecology question. Yes, Maya loves bugs. Old jumper had to laid eggs and whatnot. Just didn't enjoy that from a jar. Yeah. Lumite. Spider's living behind my car mirror. Should have just let it. Yeah. I don't see why not. Your car mirror doesn't go into your car really at any point. There's not like a connection in there. So if they were to have babies out there behind your mirror, they would essentially just disperse. So, oof, Nicole, that is a wall of text. I'll get back to that in a second. They will disperse, and a lot of those spiders will disperse by ballooning. So, if you've ever seen Charlotte's Web, at the very end where all of her children are like putting out those little silk lines and getting caught in the wind, that's real. That's a thing that happens, and it's called ballooning. They will use that air current to pick up the silk and drag the spider, and that's how they disperse, right? Because if you're a predator, if you're a spider, you're going to be competing with your own offspring for food. And so the best way to deal with that is to essentially yeet your babies as far away as possible. And that's what the wind dispersal does. it takes those spiders and disperses them all sorts of different places, and then you're no longer competing directly with your offspring for food. But that is another thing that has come up recently with the Joro spider, which is a large orb weaver from Asia that has been found in Georgia in 2014, so it's been here for like 10 years now. But there were all of these news articles that came up that were talking about, like, oh, invasive flying spider, blah, blah, blah. And the adults are big. The adults have like a 4 or 5 inch leg span, so it is a very large spider. Oops, dropped a pair of forceps. So really large leg span, but the adults don't balloon. It's just the babies that do that. And so the the media was twisting it. It was like, oh, these giant 5-inch spiders are coming out from the air, and it's like, that's not how it works. They exist, they're big, they lay their eggs, and then these little tiny, like, millimeter long spiderlings are the ones that are actually flying through the air. And that has always just really bothered me, of like, you got 2 of the points right, but you drew the wrong conclusion about what would happen. Okay, let me go see what I can do with Nicole's thing here. Birds and bats that exclusively feed on massive amounts of insects. Bracken Cave. Okay. So, for migratory birds and bats that exclusively feed on massive amounts of insects, like I'm thinking the Bracken Cave, that one cave of bats that Maya went to, how significantly do migrations affect insect populations? And do those populations experience significant growths during the times when the birds and bats are away? Do these cause mini trophic cascades or not really? That is a fantastic question. And all of it seems to be kind of linked together. So in Arizona, and I'm going to assume this is probably similar for Texas. I don't remember when Maya went to that bat cave, but in the summer, it rains in Arizona, and then the insect populations explode. At the same time, a lot of those migratory birds and those native, even the ones that stay there year round, those bird populations explode in response to that changing condition of there all of a sudden being more rain availability. So I don't know if it causes the cascade in the way that you might think. I think that what happens most likely is that those events sort of sync up. The middle of summer, when all of those bats are coming out of that cave, is also the middle of summer where there are like billions of mayflies and midges and shoreflies hatching at the same time. And so it probably, I mean, it definitely causes dents in that insect population, but insects are reproductive selected, even more so than like rabbits are in the lynx example. A single rabbit, can have a bunch of babies, but insects can lay hundreds, if not thousands of eggs at a time. And so even if several thousand of them, or even like several million of them, are getting eaten every day by bats, they have enough capacity to replenish that, or at least keep it at a level where the bats aren't completely decimating and causing the extinction of the insect. So I doubt the dynamic is the same as the rabbit lynx population. And part of that is because insect lifespans don't really go across multiple generations, right? They will breed, they will lay their eggs, and then those eggs next year will be the adults. In the rabbit population, you have this, like, over time, they're able to produce more and more, and the lynx is just slower to deal with it. The insects can produce so many offspring but the bats reproduce a lot slower than the insects do. So even then, I think they're probably, like I said, I think they're probably linked, but I don't think it's the same mechanism that keeps things in check that it is with the lynx and the rabbit. That would be my guess, though. So I will double check that. I did totally forget to put up last week's chat recap. I will make sure I do that tomorrow. Population dynamic bats etc. Okay. Oh, Nicole, what's your follow-up? Well, summer in Texas hasn't had any rain since the flood. Yeah, Jay Poten, that's definitely a good question as well. In those cases, you will oftentimes see less of that predator species, whatever it is, bats, birds, anything like that, because there simply isn't enough food for them to go around. You know, even if the birds are just getting born this season, the parent would still have to be able to find enough food to take back to the nest to have those chicks raise up. And that's not something that's very easily observable unless you know, like, where they're nesting and you're able to monitor that. So it's complicated, but that's what I would imagine happening. Is if there are fewer insects, there will generally be fewer of those other things around as well. It's just easier to notice those larger things. You're like, oh, I haven't seen X species of bird this year, but then you think about it and you're like, I also really haven't felt that many mosquitoes this year. And more likely than not, that is a tied that is a intertwined relationship. Are there insects that produce very few offspring as opposed to the massive broods? Yeah, I mean, they still produce larger quantities quicker than insects do, or sorry, than vertebrates do. Let me think. So any of the things that have parental investment often will exhibit more energy into their larvae. But the one thing that I'm specifically thinking about, all the homies talking about phenological mismatches. What's up, Joe? Welcome in. There is a family of flies called glossinids. These are the tsetse flies over in Africa. That's TSE fly. And they are known for larvipositing rather than ovipositing. So what is an ovipositor? We know that in this chat as the straussii. But the ovipositor is an egg-laying tube, and most insects have an egg-laying tube that helps them in whatever way to lay an egg. Larvipositing, as opposed to ovipositing, is when they just lay the larva instead. The egg hatches internally, so it's like the insect version of, like, live birth, essentially. And tsetse flies do have a very high degree of parental investment because they have, and this is going to sound crazy, they have, and please, I'm doing heavy air quotes here, they have milk glands. So inside the fly, there is a gland that the larva feeds off of for a while. And so that is how the fly gets nutrients inside of the adult. That way, when the adult lays the larva, it's fully grown, ready to go. Can milk a fly. It's different. It's different. It's different. It's different. It's called the milk gland. It is not milk. Flies are not mammals. You know how that works. But I will definitely link to that in the Discord afterwards as part of the recap, because that is kind of a crazy thing that happens. No, flies are not mammals. Flies are not mammals. Don't roaches give live birth? Some of them do, Fairy Elf Princess. So the hissing cockroaches, like we have here at Alveus, they do live birth essentially in the same way. The female will retain her egg sac, the ootheca, until they hatch, and then the immatures will come out all at one time. But typically, cockroaches... excuse me, something in my throat. Typically, cockroaches will have an ootheca, have this little hardened egg case, and then lay it and forget about it. Hissing cockroaches are a little bit different because they do have a higher level of parental investment than most, but typically roaches will just lay and leave the egg sac, or the ootheca, ootheca is how you spell that one. So no, not all roaches give live birth, but some of them do. Any insect that is motherly, they just don't lay, give birth, and release, they just don't care anymore. We've talked about that a few times, Beth. There are definitely insects that do care for their larvae after they've hatched. Tortoise beetles do it. There are some plant hoppers that do it. Social insects like ants, bees, wasps, and termites have a very high degree of caring for their offspring. But in those latter things, like ants, bees, and wasps, it's typically siblings giving the care to the other offspring rather than the parent themselves. So there are a couple of things where insects will interact and will actually have a higher degree of investment, but it's very rarely just going to be one individual being raised by one set of parents. Even those social insects that will or even those sub-social insects that will have some degree of parental care will still have a clutch of eggs of 10 to 20 at a time, rather than just having one. Scorpions let their babies rather than milk and parade float. Yeah, Tortilla, a lot of arachnids do. At least to a certain point. They will hatch, and then they hang out on mom for a while, and mom will then do the hunting and everything. They'll get food, and then the little babies can crawl down and feed off of whatever mom has caught. Scorpions at least will stay on for 2 molts, and then they will crawl off. It's the same thing. Wolf spiders will carry babies around, and they'll feed them as well, and so will the tailless whip scorpions, the Amblypygi. It's a different group of arachnids. You might know it from the Harry Potter movie where they're doing the Cruciatus curse on that weird looking bug. Those things will also retain their eggs, and then the larvae or the babies will crawl up and hang out on the back of mom for a little bit until they're kind of ready to go. So that is, again, is other parental investment of some sort. About eat 3,006 a night. How are there so many insect US populating us? It's more than 3,000, Beth. Individuals can eat a lot more than that, and that just goes to show you how robust insect populations are. There's also more insect species intermingling that you might not register, right? So, like, mayflies are a really good example of ones that emerge in mass during the summer. Often you think like, oh yeah, mayflies, that's this thing, and like to us, a mayfly is a mayfly. But there are something like 650 mayfly species in the US. And so when you see mayflies flying around at night, it's not all just one thing. It's big emergences of numerous species all kind of intermingling together. And so even if the bats feed on 3,000 insects a night, an individual bat feeds on that many insects a night, there are mayfly populations that will put out hundreds of thousands of individuals in an evening. And that's something that as I said, forgot to put on the recap last week. I forgot to post the recap for last week, but last week we talked about mayfly populations and how some of them can be so big when they emerge as a group that you can actually see the emergences on weather radar. So there's a lot of bats, but there are a lot more insects. Kind of going back to Nicole's question, they can just overwhelm populations based on how fast insects can reproduce. All right, catching up. Sorry, y'all. Lots of chatting, lots of yapping by me. Speed, what's up? Hello. All right. Ant mimic jumping spiders is a good enough strategy to get food. Are there other reasons why they would evolve that way? Great question, Nuclei. Yeah, it helps them get food, but also ants are a really good protection activity. Typically ants are in a colony, and typically ants can sting and bite. And so if something goes after an ant, it will oftentimes be swarmed by other ants. And so that's something that all insects really that have evolved to look like ants kind of benefit from, is that stuff goes, I'm not gonna mess with that one, because if there's one ant, there's usually another one nearby. So it does help them get close to food sometimes, because things might not expect the ant. It's like, I'm in a safe range because ants can't jump, but then the jumping spider jumps after it and gets it. But also, yeah, the protection offered by looking like an ant. Evan, have you ever eaten a bug? Yes. Lots of bugs. Yeah, plenty of times. When I was a kid, I remember having my dad buy me like the little pre-packaged flavored crickets from a museum, and those were not very good. But after getting into entomology, there have been plenty of times where I've had the opportunity to and have taken on eating insects. I had a mealworm farm at one point that I was raising for food for like my pet spiders, but we had too many beetles we had too many larvae coming out of it. So I've posted these in the Discord before too, but I can post these again tonight. Mealworm tacos. So there was a few months there where my roommate and I were producing enough mealworms that we were able to eat them a few times for extra stuff. I have no problem with it. I think it's great. I think more people should do it, but I do also understand the limitations of it, and I think I talked about this in previous ones, so I'll have to see if I can find all my links again. But there are like high-end restaurants in LA and New York that offer insects as food, and it's becoming more of a fad thing that people are able to do. But there are products like Chirps and Chapool, which are both like cricket flour companies that made it big on Shark Tank, and I've seen those foods for sale at Whole Foods. I've seen Chipotle cricket protein bars in the Denver airport. So, like, it is becoming slightly more commonplace, but really, we are the odd ones out for eating insects. There are, like, not to make any comments on current political situations, but there are like 270 some countries in the world, and over 200 of them, uh, somebody in some part of that country eats insects. So the U.S. being the holdout is like we are the vast minority of global population who don't eat some sort of insect. Even just south of the border in Mexico, chapulines are a really big thing, which are fried grasshoppers that can get flavored kind of however you want. So much to the point where they will sell them in some movie theaters, like right alongside popcorn and things like that. So I'm a big proponent of it. Definitely, I'd be happy to answer more questions about that at a later time if we do a specific insects as food discussion. But yeah, big fan of the idea. I think they taste pretty good. Don't eat a certain amount a day on our sleep. No, definitely not. Whatever number you've heard on that was way overblown. There's no reason for insects to go into your mouth while you're sleeping. Ants having a particular pheromone to alert other ants if they died or are in trouble. Is that true? Yes, Russian. They do. Ants definitely use chemicals to communicate a lot. And when they die, they do put off a certain smell that will have the ants that are on cleanup duty take that body out of the colony so it's not like rotting and spreading disease inside the colony. So yeah, they do. They do that. Ever seen the video where there's a zillion midgets flying around and people are swinging something to catch them and making burger patties out of them? I have no... Midge burger is crazy, Joe. No, I haven't seen that one, but not surprising. I don't think I could do snails. You could mushroom with a texture. Well, that's okay, Tortilla. Snails is not bugs, so we're not talking about them right now. There are lots of ants that are farmers, like weaver ants farming aphids for their nectar. Ants do a lot of the farming, at least across the examples that I can think of. There are ants that tend to aphids, that they'll do that, but ants have also developed agriculture to some extent. Leafcutter ants and fungus growing ants. The leafcutter ants aren't eating the leaf. They're taking the leaf down into the tunnel and inoculating it with fungus. And so then the ants are then feeding on the fungus. So they have figured out how to grow a food item for themselves. Outside of ants, I can't really think of other insects that will like maintain food growth specifically for them or maintain other insects for access to food. But yeah, ants do lots of farming. Heck yeah, Eggpot. Good night. Do leafcutter bees also harvest leaves for fungus? No. They use them for a completely different purpose. Leafcutter bees are snipping the edges out of leaves in order to make a brood cell. In those tunnels, like we were just looking at the little bug hotel that we've got in the pollinator garden, they will go into the back of there and make like a little pocket out of leaves. And then in the back of that pocket, they will mix up something that is called, and this is not a joke, bee bread, which is a mixture of pollen and nectar and the bee's saliva, and they will pack it to the back of this little leaf bundle. Then they will lay an egg on the bee bread and then close up the end of that little bundle with the start of a new bundle. And so in these tubes, there is a sequence of bees that have been laid in these little egg pouches that are made from leaf cuts. And the cool thing about leafcutter bees is that they will not all use the same material. So there are some bees that will specifically make their little bee tubes out of certain flowers. So even if you can't see the bee or you don't know if you don't know what species is making the little tube, sometimes you can figure it out based on what material was used to make the little bundle. And then the other ridiculously cool thing that happens is that those leafcutter bees are also haplodiploid, meaning that they can choose whether or not to lay a fertilized egg, and unfertilized eggs will turn into males and fertilized eggs will turn into females. She will lay at the back of the tube, so like the last egg to hatch is going to be a female. The one in front of that is also probably going to be a female. The one in front of that is going to be a female, but as you get towards the front of the tube, you have males. And so what happens then is the males will hatch out sequentially, like the first one will come out, the second one will come out, the third one will come out. By the time that the females are ready, because females will generally take longer to develop, the males will have flown off to try and find other females, so it prevents inbreeding, but it also then allows them to come out of the tube without having to chew through their siblings. So it's actually a really phenomenal system. It's quite crazy. Bugs are ridiculously cool for doing stuff like this. But yeah, so they use the leaf cuttings to make brood cells, which are these the little pockets where they lay their larvae. They make the bread, and then they lay the tube, females in the back, males in the front, in order to like accommodate for that longer life cycle and the emergence time. So I will put lots of resources about leafcutter bees in the chat's recap for this week. I know we just talked sort of briefly about it, but there's a lot of really cool stuff that happens with leafcutter bees. There are days when I'd like to chew through my siblings. Well, why do you think I'm an only child, Joe? Are the ants that are symbiotic with mushrooms also considered agriculture? Agriculture loosely, Golden Eagle, but yes. So they're able to take that fungus from colony to colony if they have to move. They understand it enough where they know that they have to take a certain part of that mushroom in order to basically start growing that food again elsewhere. And we talked about that just not too long ago. Might have been like 3 weeks ago on chats about the bark beetles that have the little fungus spore pockets on their body that are called mycangia. And they do the same thing. They carry that fungus from the tree that they're born in, and fly over to a different tree, and then they're able to take the spores out and essentially inoculate that second tree with the fungus that they need to make food. Big beetle! Hell yeah. Who is this, chat? Do you know? Do you remember? Yeah, Roxers. Very good. Tortilla, nailed it. Yes. You haven't forgotten. This is a darkling beetle, chat. Thanks, Joe. Steve the darkling beetle. If it comes out again, that would be nice, but if not, that's okay. So darkling beetles is the family Tenebrionidae, and it is a really large family. And they look like a lot of different things. I mean, you know, they're very diverse in their body forms, but in North America, there are over 1,200 species of darkling beetle, and about 20,000 species worldwide. So it's a really, really big group. And in Texas and the Southwest, those big dark ones, that was probably the genus Eleodes, but very hard to say just from that view. But those ones, if you've ever seen in the desert or pictures of beetles that kind of do a handstand, those are darkling beetles. So they have a chemical scent defense that they will lift their butts up into the air, kind of do a handstand, and then if you disturb them, they let off this stinky, sticky chemical defense. So, smells pretty bad when that happens, but what we were talking about earlier, mealworms, with the mealworm tacos, mealworms, if you've ever bought them for feeding to your reptiles or fishing bait or anything like that, if you were to take care of those larvae and let them go through their metamorphosis process, those mealworms turn into a darkling beetle. So mealworms, darkling beetles, usually when I explain them to people, is like, oh yeah, people have heard of mealworms in some context, right? Whether it be for reptiles or fishing or, you know, whatever. But so that is the same family as that one that we just saw, is the same grouping with darkling beetles. Or if you put a mealworm in your lizard's enclosure and it forgets and doesn't eat it. Yes. People get that all the time on insect identification pages. They're like, what is this in my lizard tank? And it's like, well, that's old food. Ooh. Good find, Logan. Very, very cool. Are these the guys that collect water in their butts to drip into their heads in their drink? Yes, it is Starberry. So those are not... The ones in Arizona and like in the Southwest do that sometimes. The ones you're thinking of are in Namibia, which is in southern Africa. But yes, the same family. And if you've ever seen or heard of the blue death feigning beetles, those are also Tenebrionids as well. Mealworm beetle and noodles enclosure a couple of months ago. Interesting. I must have missed that, Roxers. Yeah, everybody. Katie's back, baby. Katie did that. What did Katie do? Good question, Jay Potten. I'm not sure. The name katydid and why they're called that is from a European species of katydid that the call sounds like katydid, katydid, katydid. They don't all sound like that, but that name has been applied to the whole family here. And this is a really nice look at it, or a really nice look at one. And you can see several of the things that make a katydid what it is. It has these super, super long back legs that usually stick up over the back. Oh, thanks, Roxers. I'll take a look at that when we're done here. The wings that go out over the abdomen, they do sometimes, but not always. And those super long antennae that she's able to, or that she's feeling around with right now. Katydids have absurdly long antennae, oftentimes longer than their entire body, that they're able to do exactly what she's doing right now and feeling around, just using her antennae to smell, because the chemoreceptors, or the scent picker uppers on an insect, all tend to be focused on the antennae. And she's also feeling around. If there's any change in the leaf structure around her, right now, we can see her, obviously, with this camera, but if you were out there, she would blend in very, very well onto this leaf, because her wings give her that elongate, almost leaf-like appearance. And so she's very, very camouflaged right now, even though we have a relatively good look at her. She doesn't know that we can see her. But then, yeah, chat, what's that? What's going on down there at the bottom? What do y'all know about that? Yeah. Ovipositor, yes. Strawberry time, yes. So, katydids will oftentimes have a shorter but stouter, sort of like sword-like ovipositor. And crickets will have a much longer, skinnier ovipositor. I think the one in the Straw Ussy emote might be from a mantis. I actually don't know for sure. But yes, that little hook up at the bottom should be her ovipositor. And this plant, Logan, I don't know if you're gonna mark this in any way, but they will oftentimes lay their eggs like tiles. So on the edge of plants like this, they will just lay a row of eggs that sort of overlap with one another, and the eggs are flattened. So it sort of looks like a line of roof tiles. So it would be interesting to potentially come back to this, or come back to this next week and see if she laid eggs anywhere on here. But yeah, I don't know if you how you want to mark that down there. They said technically the word fish is a reference to catch all for. Okay, Sam, I was listening to a podcast where they said technically the word fish is a reference / catch-all term for all kinds of fish. Is the word bugs the same way? Just being the generic catch-all word for invertebrates, and there isn't one invertebrate that is called bug. Sort of yes, sort of no. I can see that Courtney's already answered this, and it's definitely come up before. But I, as a professional entomologist, am totally fine telling people that I work on bugs. It's a lot easier than saying entomologist, because they're like, well, what's that mean? Oh yeah, I'm an entomologist, so I work with insects or I work with bugs. I am totally fine with that. People's definition of bug can get pretty lax. Insects, all bugs, fine with me. Spiders and centipedes and other like land arthropods, totally fine. Snails, I don't think I would call a snail a bug. I wouldn't call a worm a bug. But some people do include those things in whatever they're calling a bug. I have limits, but I respect whatever, choices people are making to refer to bugs. In the entomology circles, when you're referring to the order Hemiptera, so assassin bugs, stink bugs, cicadas, aphids, all of those sorts of things, those are what we would call true bugs. And in an entomology context, if I'm specifically talking about that, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going over to curate the true bug drawer this week. I would say true bug when I'm specifically referring to Hemiptera, but I personally use bug as like a catch-all term most of the time. Using true bug is how I make that differentiation between the catch-all term and the specific term. So that's a good question, but yeah, it depends. Prototype reference objects, how we categorize them based on features that. Yeah. And then like how, and this is not really related to what you're saying, but like how fish is singular and fish is plural of many fish of the same species, but fish is also correct when you're referring to multiple individuals of multiple species of fish. And that's another one. It's like, oh yeah, fish is the correct plural. It's like, well, no, fishes is correct if it's multiple individuals of multiple species. And language is really neat. Someone in my stream the other day said it's a very well worn internet joke, and like a Facebook mom posted it for sure. But the etymologist, like the word origins person, people who confuse etymology and entomology bug me more than I can put into words or whatever. A fun play on the words there, but on, entomologist versus etymologist. But learning insect terms and learning species names specifically, you start to pick up on a lot of recurring characters and recurring themes. So learning insect identification and insect names has helped me a lot, like figure out Latin roots, and I notice them in other places now. People are okay with including isopods and bugs, but not other crustaceans. Silvera, I think that's because they're on land. I would never. So, I'm gonna end it off here, and I don't know if this is I don't think this is a controversial take. Everyone says it. Shrimps is bugs, but like more technically evolutionarily, bugs is shrimp because crustaceans evolved first. I would never include crabs in my loose definition of bug. But technically, evolutionarily, that is something that I probably should include. But I think that people, one, don't know that isopods are crustaceans, so they have no reason to think that that's a different thing. But if it's on land and it's got an exoskeleton, that fits into my loose definition of bugs. Because, like I said, snails and worms don't fit in my definition of even when I'm using it loosely. But they don't have an exoskeleton, so I wouldn't count them anyway. But isopods, they're on land, they've got an exoskeleton, they're crawling around, it's a bug. But yes, evolutionarily, and I know I've posted this in the thing before, but it's worth coming back to. The grouping that includes insects and shrimp is called pancrustacea, which means like all crustacean sort of thing. So evolutionarily, insects did evolve from crustaceans. And so in that logic, bugs is shrimp, but also loosely shrimp is bugs. Snails and slugs are mollusks. It's a whole separate thing. Are xenomorphs bugs? I've never... embarrassing thing to admit in front of 1,000 people. I've never seen Alien. I don't know if they've got 6 legs. I don't think they do. So I would not call them bugs. However, the premise for Alien was indeed based on insect parasitoids. So, xenomorph design from insects. So I will end it there, so y'all can judge me for having not seen that movie. But yes, insect parasitoids were the inspiration for the chestburster scene, and then the little mouth within a mouth was probably based on dragonfly naiads, which have like a really crazy mask that kind of shoot out like that as like an undermouth. So that's that. I think we will end it there for tonight. Very successful chats, if I do say so myself. Yeah. Thank you, as always, for sticking around and hanging out for another event-filled bug hunt / chat chats. Thank you, Logan, for driving our cameras. As always, phenomenal job. We've got a really sick view of this Katie did here. Hopefully we can come back and see if she's maybe laid eggs at some point. But thank you to Logan for driving. If you haven't yet joined, we do have the Alveus Bug Enjoyers Discord. ! Bug cord for access to that. We can talk about stuff. I post the recap, so anything that I've mentioned tonight that I said I would link or whatever, I'll put in there. You can ask bug questions, get stuff identified throughout the week so you don't have to wait until Wednesdays. Also, relatively new on there is a role selection channel. I stream personally on my own Twitch account, and I do pre-chat chats. So for 2 hours before we do this, I have a microscope hooked up at my house, and I stream looking at beetles under the microscope. So if you want more bug content, please feel free to come hang out over on my Twitch channel, and in that role selection thing in the bug cord, you can also select the role so you get notified when I go live. There is an Alveus Clips channel, which I just linked there in chat, organized and run by one of our community members. It is a great place to see all of the wonderful animal highlights that you miss throughout the week. So please go check that out and subscribe on YouTube. Last thing, stick around for rounds. Right after this, we're going to go around and check the animals one more time before we all have to head off to bed. And that's going to happen immediately after this. Thank you again for being such a wonderful community. Truly, what we have done in the last 3 days was spectacular and more than anyone could have hoped for. And I am just so excited to be, this minor role in the grand scheme of things happening with Alveus. But this community is what makes this stuff special. And don't ever forget that. You guys were part of something very, very huge today. So with that, I shall leave you off. I will see you hopefully on my stream next Monday. If not, back here, same time, same place next week for another Bug Hunts. See y'all later.